So our next speaker is Kelly Anderson. She attended Texas State with a Bachelor's of Science in Dance Education. She's been teaching for 6 years and dancing for 23 years. And it's very exciting. On June 25th, she celebrated her 1-year anniversary of a double lung transplant. So without further ado, Kelly Anderson.
Okay, I'm a little bit nervous, so go easy on me. Thank you so much for having me speak today. I'm truly honored to be able to stand here in front of you all and speak continuously without coughing interruptions, although that means I had to put a little bit extra into my speech. Today, I'd like to speak about a couple of issues that I found important in the success of a longer and happier life for CF and transplant. It's not all going to be pretty, but it will be my truth. I would first like to start off with a quote that perfectly sums up my transplant journey by Dr. Seuss. Nobody said it would be easy, they just promised it would be worth it. I want you all to know that receiving a transplant is not a cure. It is like having an entirely different disease altogether. Relearning all new medication, habits, and keeping up with multiple changes in those medications, schedules, continuous care, and many ups and downs throughout the process. It's not automatically a happily ever after. It's a developing long process of a twisted kind of fairy tale. I also want you to know that the pain and struggles are worth it in order to be able to live a longer, healthier, and more active lifestyle. It takes strength, work, diligence, and lots of patience, which I do not have. I am so blessed to be able to share my story with you today because one young lady and her family, I'm gonna cry already, okay, chose to donate her organs. It is the greatest gift I will ever receive, and it's because someone else lost their life. This fact is an emotional and mental aspect many transplant patients may overlook, and they may not think immediately of it as an important thing to focus on. But it truly is the core of the transplant journey, and it has a huge impact on who I am as a person every day. It brings on a sense of guilt and sadness, along with an overwhelming sense of gratefulness, which, as you can imagine, is sometimes quite conflicting. Add that with the feeling of having someone else's organs inside of you, and it's honestly just pretty weird. These aren't feelings I have all the time, but it's something I think about quite often. Although I have prepared for the possibility of transplant and all the emotions that go with it for my entire life, it is still a strange experience to go through. And I wanted to acknowledge the donor and her family for giving me life through their tragedy. Thank you. Now, as I tell my story, know that it is long and maybe a bit confusing, so stick with me through this. I have danced all my life, and I've taught dance for 6 years, like he said. I graduated from Texas State University with a bachelor's in dance and was part of the Strutters dance team and the Texas State Dance Company. Dance is my passion, and it's what first brought me to the wonderful CF clinic here in Tyler. I moved here to teach dance in the amazing school district, Chapel Hill, in 2013. I truly believe dance has really been the key to keeping me out of the hospital for most of my life. As a child, I was rarely hospitalized. My first tune-up was in the 4th grade, and after that, I was not hospitalized until the 9th grade. I had a very normal childhood for the most part, and I'm very thankful for that. I never thought of myself as a CFer, so much as a person first and having CF as something that just so happened to be. It was my mom's goal to raise me as normally as possible and not treat me any differently or as a fragile item because of my disease. I believe this has made me as strong as I am today, and for that I am extremely grateful to her for not allowing myself to fall victim to my own body fighting against me. Thanks, Mom. I do not let CF define me. I am strong, funny, goofy, passionate, creative, and caring first. This is important to me, and I believe all of us with CF should think this way. After all, mind over matter goes a long way, especially when you aren't wrapped up in a world concentrated on how sick you are. Once I graduated college in 2010, my world became focused around my disease more and more my health declined. I was hospitalized a couple of times a year or just did home IVs so I could continue to teach dance. This pattern held up pretty well for about 3 years until Christmas time in 2013 of my first year teaching here in Tyler, and that's when I met Dr. Taskar, and she took the most amazing care of my health and just knew I was a great candidate for transplant. As my health kept steady on the rocks through the beginning of 2014, it led me to my transplant journey. When I was first evaluated in January of 2014, the transplant team felt I wasn't ready yet, because although I was pretty bad, I was still living and acting as normally as I possibly could, and handling the bad lungs that I had. Although handling the organs that make you breathe wasn't exactly a way to live life. In February of 2014, my lung collapsed, and me, being as stubborn as I am, laying in the ambulance, literally dying, kept telling myself over and over and over, I'm not going to die, I'm not going to die, I'm not going to die. Truly believing in mind over matter once again. When I got to the closest hospital, which was not this one, and not the one that I told them to go to, can you tell I'm stubborn? Well, when we got to the hospital, the ER doctors told me if they had driven the extra 5 minutes to the hospital I requested, I would not have made it there alive. I was in the hospital for about a month, getting back to my CF normal after the lung collapse, when in March of 2014, the transplant doctors decided it was time for me to begin the transplant process. I was evaluated for the transplant, where I was tested in nearly every way you could possibly think of in order to prepare me for the transplant. 9 years later, I was finally placed on the transplant list in December of 2014 after many medical setbacks and CF-related hospitalizations. As my health began to decline drastically, I still worked and taught dance while on the waiting list until about 2 months before I received my lungs. Those were times when I used shortcuts to get through everything in life. I found ways to rest while teaching, and I began to do many more things I wanted to do, giving me the motivation to live on, while recognizing more and more the things I needed to live on for. No matter how bad it may have gotten, I never lost hope, and I never gave up on myself, and I could have never done it without the amazing support system I had by my side the entire time. Before my double lung transplant on June 25th of 2015, I received 3 calls for lungs and 2 trips to the hospital before I actually got the transplant. I was prepared for the waiting and the false alarms and the possibility of the lungs not being healthy enough to use for the transplant. But I was not prepared for the adventure after the transplant. There were many obstacles I went through during my transplant recovery. Right before my surgery, an awesome nurse came in to explain how things would go, and I will never forget how she explained it to me. She said, "They're gonna cut you open straight across and then pop you open like the hood of a car." That's really what she said. Probably not the best visual right before a surgery I was already extremely nervous about, but it definitely made me laugh and got my mind off of it for a second. The first day or so, I was still asleep, of course, and the next few days were focused on rehabilitating my body and trying to walk the halls. To say it was a shock to the system is an understatement. I had extreme pain and crazy sensitive nerves, which to this day, my nerves around the incision cause pain and discomfort every now and then, which is to be expected. I mean, they did open me like the hood of a car. Once I started walking, I began to slowly get back to normal with working out and building muscle. My first day out of the hospital after surgery was another shock to the system, just simply walking outside. My first shower was a nightmare. Once again, all those nerves were going ballistic, and I felt like needles were poking my entire body. You know the feeling when you get your hands, when your hands are freezing and you get them under hot water, and it's like they're on fire, but they're freezing at the same time? It was like that all over my body. That's not the greatest shower in the world. Not to mention the panic attack that went along with the shower. Bundles of fun. I was out of the hospital, I believe, for one day before I had to be admitted for a little infection, which they said was normal for CF patients. I was treated for about a week and then released again, only to go back again the next day for numbness in the right side of my body. We never really found out what happened with that, but at least I was out of the hospital in a few days. After that, I believe we had gotten to the 1-month mark, and I had a scheduled bronchoscopy and biopsy to check for rejection in the lungs, or maybe not to check, but just to do. My results came back with a level A4 rejection, one level below the worst. Of course, I was anxious and worried, but the doctors and my family were optimistic. They treated me with high dosages of steroids to lower my immune system and help stop my body from fighting against the new lungs. So after another week or so of treatment in the hospital, I went back home. All this time, I was still going to transplant appointments weekly to make sure everything was still going well with my new lungs and still getting rehab, physical rehab at home. I'm pretty certain I had another issue I went to the hospital for, but forgive me, I don't remember all the admissions. A couple weeks later, the doctors did another biopsy to check and see if the rejection had cleared with the steroid treatment. The first dose did not do the trick. So another trip to the hospital for a second dose of steroids, and the doctors also added another immune suppressant drug to help knock down my annoyingly strong immune system. I blame that on the CF. By this time, we were in month 2 or 3. It's really hard to keep up. The doctors decided to let me go home to San Antonio despite my complications because overall my lung functions were still moving in the right direction. I was out for a week and a half to 2 weeks when I began to have severe headaches one night. I just took a bunch of Tylenol and tried to sleep it off, thinking it was just a migraine. The next night, the same thing happened, and it would not go away. I began vomiting early in the morning several times. I couldn't even keep water down. I called my transplant coordinator, who advised me to go to the ER. My fiance took me to the ER, where my mom met us, and by the time we got there, my blood pressure was 200-something over 100-something, which, in case you didn't know, that is not good. And remember, I'm still in San Antonio at this point, and the ER doctors are in contact with the transplant team in Dallas. This was quite possibly the worst pain of the entire transplant experience. I don't remember much from this night because my head was in so much pain, and I was in and out of consciousness from all the meds to keep me from that pain. So most of this information comes from my mom and my fiance. The Dallas doctors decided to transport me from San Antonio to Dallas, and after a few hours of no improvement and still vomiting, we flew to Dallas in a tiny plane. Once I arrived, I was taken to ICU, and I'm sure plenty of testing happened after that. There were several theories, but we found out I was having a severely bad reaction to one of the immune suppressant medications. And it was causing brain swelling, which was causing the headaches, mood swings, and vomiting. After a couple weeks in the hospital, I was released after being placed on a different immunosuppressant to replace the one causing the issues. And probably a couple days before we got the results back from the third biopsy telling us I'd still had the rejection and it hadn't gotten any better from the 2 steroid treatments, they gave me a stronger medication to fight off the rejection. This hospital stay was no walk in the park, with more side effects from this drug kicking in. Mostly just bad headaches and body aches, and a yucky feeling as a cherry on top. I'd say we were there for 10 to 12 days trying to clear up the rejection, but we were still optimistic that this would really get rid of the rejection this time. After the third treatment for the rejection, I traveled back to San Antonio and was able to stay out of the hospital for almost an entire month. Woo! Before we received the follow-up results from the last rejection treatment. Once again, it didn't work. But this time, at least, it went down a couple levels. My darn immune system, this just keeps fighting. Back to Dallas in the hospital for another treatment of the harsh drugs to fix the rejection for good. After this treatment, it was my 6-month checkup, and I had just reached 1 month out of the hospital when we received the results of the second dose of the harsher rejection treatment. It was rejection-free, finally. By this time, I was an old hat at all this mess, and several of my doctors told me that my case had been pretty rare with all the complications that happened. You're welcome, Dr. Torres. There he is. With all that being said, as a patient, I have learned to keep track of my own test results and always know what's going on with my body. I like to keep the doctors on their toes. They can't keep up with every single test result, so it's a responsibility as a good patient to make sure that I do. This is my life, and I always make it a point to be my own doctor with knowing what's going on. So although it was a tough road for the first few months, I still struggle with keeping my kidneys at a decent level of functioning while on so many medications, I want you to keep in mind the low likelihood of having so many difficulties and know how thankful I am for having done this. And now, knowing all the different complications that come along with transplant, I would do it 1,000,000 times over to be here and be with my friends and family that I love so much. Their support and company through the ups and downs and crazy emotions through the entire process, from evaluation to my 1-year transplant anniversary, which I like to call my lungiversary. Their love and support is why I would go through the pain and give the doctors trouble and cause a ruckus over and over again. You have to understand, this is not easy, but it is such a blessing to be able to know the feeling of breathing clearly and walking more than 10 feet without getting out of breath. It is priceless. And to be able to have talked this long without taking a deep breath, it's ridiculous. It's amazing the many changes I've noticed in my life. First off, I can breathe. I never cough unless something goes down the wrong pipe. I can walk forever, it seems, without even getting out of breath. Or if I'm wearing uncomfortable high heels, which I changed. My hands and feet aren't always cold. My fingernails aren't clubbed anymore. I can enjoy an entire meal without getting out of breath just from the simple act of eating. In the end, all the pain and hard times are worth the results. To now be able to dry myself with a towel when I shower, whereas before I had to take baths to conserve energy, and air dry because drying with a towel was too strenuous. Sorry. My car would always be on cruise control, no matter how far I was driving. I would get out of breath just eating, and my weight just kept going down and down. I hadn't the energy to do the simplest of things, and so I found so many shortcuts in life in order to save energy for other things I needed or just wanted to do. When a person has cystic fibrosis, doing what we want is a complete luxury after doing what we need to do. Before the transplant, my lungs couldn't keep up with my body, and now my body can't keep up with my lungs. Cystic fibrosis is an ugly, nasty disease that can easily ruin a person and bring them down. And even with that being said, I've never thought of my CF as a disability, but more of an ability of strength to overcome, fight, and to never give up on what I want. From ages I can't even remember, doctors have been telling me I won't live to see this age or that age many times. And I'm here to let you know that I've surpassed all of their horribly negative predictions. And sure, it's a life sentence as a CFer, but it should never be a death sentence. Before I go, I want to tell you a story one of my childhood friends told me. I recently reconnected with her after many years of being separated, just through all of life's obstacles. My friend Nancy wanted to congratulate me on my engagement and told me that she was so happy that I would actually get married. I was kind of put off by that comment. What would make you say that? Nancy said, I have never forgotten, after 25 years, something you said when we were in daycare. Of course I'm curious. What could I have said when I was like 3 or 4? She tells me, well, our teacher was playing Barbies with us, and one Barbie had a wedding dress on. The teacher asks us, what kind of wedding dress do you think you will have when you get married? All the girls in the class are going on about a white poofy dress, a pink one, a rainbow dress, you know, as little girls do dream. And Nancy says to me, "But you were in the corner, quiet, and not saying anything." So the teacher then asked me, "What about you, Kelly?" And then I answered something that my friend has never forgotten. Nancy tells me, "You said, 'Oh, I don't think about that. I won't get married.'" Because I won't live that long. I have cystic fibrosis. Of course, I'm bawling when she told me the story, and now, because I don't even remember that. And I have always tried to tell myself to not let this disease get the best of me. And now, because of my transplant, my friend and I will prove myself and the doctor's predictions wrong, and I will marry the best man I've ever known this November. This entire journey has been filled with so much emotion, and I could not have made it through without my wonderful support system and the great doctors and my donor. But I absolutely would not be here without that donor. And if any of you are not donors or know people who aren't, please become a donor and encourage others to save lives and become donors as well. Before I close, I have one more quote for the road that all CF patients should live by. Don't quit, suffer now, and live the rest of your life as a champion. Muhammad Ali. Thank you.
Gosh, I don't know if I can talk now. My goodness. Absolutely. God, what a beautiful story, Kelly. And we have a question for you.
It's lace and mermaid and strapless, and it's got some glitters up here too. It's got a little bit of everything.
Any other questions for Kelly? Well, let me say congratulations on your engagement. Very exciting. I know for me, standing back there listening to this, again, not coming from a medical background, I'm not privy to so many of these stories. And your life and your battle is an incredible inspiration, not only to those that are overcoming similar challenges, but for those of us that have just so escaped any kind of medical challenges. I mean, I've never even had a broken bone. And so it's, I whine about going to get my TB test every year because I don't want to get a shot in the arm, and I'm a big baby. Yeah, no kidding. And, but I really mean it. Your story is incredible. Keep telling it. And gosh, just keep living and fighting, and do not accept any of the negative reports, like you said before. Just keep going and defy the odds. And you inspire all of us. And so keep at it. I think you've got a gift here, huh? Give her another round of applause.